everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. This is their second trial. The first trial took place in 93 and ended in a mistrial. So we are, and that had cameras. We streamed through that. Now we are reading through the transcripts because that's all we have, unfortunately. And without further ado, let's get started. We left off with the brother's uncle, Brian Andersen, and he was on, I want to say cross examination. And we will pick up right where we left off. And then we're also going to, so we'll finish his cross and then we'll get into a little bit of Marzie Eisenberg's testimony, probably read through some of her direct and a little bit of her cross because just depending on how far we get in this episode. So that's where we're what we're gonna do today. So let me shrink myself. Here we go. All right. Oh, and we are on part 24. Let me fix that real quick. So yeah, we are starting off with the testimony of November 3rd. So we are just starting off the day with November 3rd. There's a link below in the description of the video where you can find the transcripts and follow along if you are interested in doing so. All right, so let us begin. We've got the court says, as soon as the jury is here, we will start with the testimony. Are your witnesses here? We have the completion of Mr. Andersen, and Ms. Nahira says, then we have Ms. Eisenberg. Court says, and who else? Ms. Nahira says, and then we have the 402 on Detective Zoller, so that's going to be a hearing outside the presence of the jury, most likely, and then Detective Zoller and the coroner's representative. Mr. Khan says, yes, we also have a representative of the coroner's office, which I think should be done outside the presence of the jury. I don't think it's necessary to do that in the presence of the jury, but that's also subject to the motion we filed. The court says, we have a juror who has to leave for a medical appointment at 2:45, so I want to finish all the testimony before the jury as soon as we can accomplish or accommodate that schedule. Ms. Abramson says, and then we can have a discussion about the photographs. I'm not sure what photograph she means. Maybe the ones of well, it could be anything in evidence. Who knows? Ms. Nahir says, are we waiting for a juror now, Your Honor? The court says, no, they're here. Ms. Nahir says, because I'm going to say, or I was going to say that issue with Detective Zoller will probably not take very long outside the presence of the jury, and then we can do it all in front of the jury. The court says, if we were ready to do it, I'll do it right now. Okay. Ms. Abramson says, let's do it now. Ms. Nahara says, I'll see if he's here. He should be outside. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I am going to mark the travel document of Brian Andersen's as 165. So he got the document, or the defense got the document from Brian Andersen that he referenced in his testimony regarding when he came in and, his itinerary, that kind of thing. The court says, okay. Bailiff says jurors are coming through. The court says, okay, the jury is here. Is Mr. Andersen here? Ms. Nahira says, yes, he is, Your Honor. Court says, okay, then let's get him in, and then we'll just start up with the testimony before the jury. Okay, the witness is back. I'll have the jury come in, and we will resume on cross-examination. The court says, the jury is in. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and we are ready to resume with the trial. The witness still on the witness stand. Would you state your name again for the record, please? The witness says, Brian Andersen. The court says, okay, Mr. Andersen, I will remind you that you are still under oath and we will continue with cross-examination. Okay. Ms. Abramson says, "Good morning, Mr. Anderson." Good morning. Let me take you back to the time you went to Attorney Wright's house, okay, whenever that date was. What is your best recollection as you sit here now concerning how a locksmith or a safecracker or whatever it was got to that house? They drove there. And how do you know they drove there? The vehicle pulled up with them in it. And your recollection is there was more than one person? Yes, ma'am. And what is your best recollection about any efforts of anyone's part to get them there? That's a confusing question. What's your recollection about any efforts on anyone's part to get them there, to call them there? He says, I don't recall. Do you have any recollection of any arrangements being made for a safecracker or a locksmith before you went to Mr. Wright's house? I believe it was in the discussion that we had with Mr. Wright on the phone. And in that discussion that you had with Mr. Wright on the phone, who was supposed to provide the safecracker? I don't recall. Mr. Anderson, do you remember that the locksmith came to the Elm Drive house and went with you and Carlos Baralt and Erik and Lyle Menendez to Mr. Wright's house? I don't recall that. Now, when you went into well, strike that. When you got to Mr. Wright's house, was the safe already in the garage? Yes, ma'am. You have no recollection of anyone going to a back bedroom and taking the safe and putting it in the garage. Is that correct? I don't recall that. And when you entered the garage after the safecracker or the locksmiths had said the safe was open, where were Erik and Lyle Menendez? They were in the garage. Were they near the safe? Yeah, the garage wasn't that big. Well, the safe wasn't that big either, was it? No. It wasn't like a bank vault. It was the kind of safe you could pick up and carry, wasn't it? It was pretty heavy. Did you ever pick it up? No, ma'am. So then how the hell would you know? Was it ever taken from Mr. Wright's house? I don't know that. Don't remember that you all drove off with it? I don't recall that. And when you were in the garage with the safe, you had an opportunity to look inside it, correct? Yes, ma'am. I almost forgot to tell you guys, announcement time. This just popped into my head. So, I should have said this at the very, very beginning, and I totally forgot. I apologize. The brothers, they had a parole hearing June 13th, as you may recall, and that by their own lawyer's request. So don't panic. The parole hearing is being pushed back until August 21st and 22nd, but this was by their own strategic reasoning. So it's more time for them to prepare. So don't freak out. That's why I didn't. That's why I forgot, because I mean it's a big deal that the dates changed, but it's not like the DA is not doing anything nefarious. Nothing's happening. It's just the brothers want a little more time to prepare for a parole because it kind of happened real fast. So they just need a little more time. Sorry, that just popped in my head. All right. So you don't remember that you drove off with the safe. I don't recall that. And when you were in the garage with the safe, you had an opportunity to look inside it, correct? Yes, ma'am. And do you have a specific recollection of actually doing that, looking inside it? Yes, ma'am. And that's when you saw some papers there? Yes, ma'am. Would it be fair to say, Mr. Anderson, that given the emotional trauma of that week, you do not have a perfect memory of the sequence of events? Yes, ma'am. And would it be safe to say, or fair to say, that that's true for the entire time you were in California that week following the death of your sister? It was a very emotional time. And you don't have a very perfect memory of the sequence of events? No, ma'am. Now, I have a piece of paper I wanted to show you. You brought with you here to California on this trip from Chicago or the Chicago area a travel itinerary and a photocopy of an airplane ticket, correct? Yes, ma'am. And what's your best recollection as to the date that you actually arrived in Los Angeles that week of August 23rd, 1989? Early in the morning of Wednesday. And that would have been August 23rd. The 20th was Sunday. Yes, ma'am. Okay, and I have a document, Your Honor, that I've marked 165. Let me show you this document and ask if this is what you brought with you. Yes, ma'am. And that document shows an itinerary and the copy of a ticket for a round trip, if you will, a round trip ticket from Chicago to Los Angeles back to Chicago. Yes, ma'am. And the return is not noted on that itinerary. It's an open return. That's correct. And that shows that the arrival was August 23rd, sometime after midnight. Yes, ma'am. Do you have an independent recollection now of when, in fact, you did return to Chicago? It was after the memorial service. And the memorial service was on which day? Friday. And at what time? Sometime midday, as I recall. Midday? And do you remember whether you returned to Chicago on Friday or the next day, Saturday? I'm pretty sure it was on Saturday. You think it was Saturday? Yes, ma'am. And if that's true, if it was Saturday, you would have spent the Friday evening at the Bellage Hotel. Yes, ma'am. And after you returned to Chicago, did you then travel again to Princeton for the funeral? Yes, ma'am. And when was the funeral? As I recall, it was the first part of the following week. So you're not certain of the date? The 29th, I think. You think the 29th. And the 29th was what day of the week? Do you remember? Monday or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. So you're not certain? No, ma'am. I want to turn your attention now to the trip to the bank, okay? Yes, ma'am. Where did you start out from before you got to the bank? I don't recall. And how did you get to the bank? By what means of transportation? I believe I drove with Carlos. You drove? Beralt. You drove or Carlos drove? Carlos drove. And we are talking about Carlos Beralt, not Carlos Menendez, correct? Yes, ma'am. And do you know whose car Carlos drove? I don't recall. And you have testified that Eric and Lyle Menendez were there as well. How'd they get there? To my recollection, they drove independently. And whose car did they take? I don't recall. I think they had one of the parents' cars, but I'm not sure. And when you got to, well, was there some arrangement with the bank made in advance of your getting there? I believe a call had been made to the bank. Did you make the call? I don't recall that I did. Do you know who did make the call? Not at this time. Excuse me? Not at this time. When you got to the bank, do you have any recollection of anyone meeting you or greeting you from the bank? Yes, ma'am. Was it a man or a woman? A woman. And was that person, the bank officer who indicated that you could not go back because you were not either a potential heir nor an executor? No, ma'am. Was the bank officer the one who gave you that information a man? I believe so. And had you stated your desire to go back and look in the box to this bank officer? Yes, ma'am. And he said he couldn't allow that. It wasn't legal, correct? He wanted to see who would be appropriate and proper to go back there. He is talking about rules and regulations of some kind, not his own personal opinion. That's correct. And he indicated that you didn't have in the law what we call standing to go back there. I would say that would be true. Oh, so that changes a little bit how he tried to portray it on direct that Lyle and Erik didn't want them back there. Now we're finding out that it's protocol. And it's your testimony that both Erik and Lyle Menendez went back to the safety deposit box area with the bank officer. Yes, ma'am. And you're sure of that? Yes, ma'am. Now, at some point, did they emerge, the bank officer and Erik and Lyle Menendez? Yes, ma'am. And what happened after they emerged from viewing the box? We assume they viewed the box. Then what happened? They indicated there was no will to be found there. And then what happened? I remember a general discussion and then we left there. A general discussion and you left. How long do you believe after Erik and Lyle Menendez and the bank officer emerged did you leave? It wasn't very long. 3, 4 minutes? Maybe 15. Do you remember, Mr. Andersen, that the bank officer inventoried the contents of the box? No, ma'am. Do you remember that the bank officer handed a copy of the inventory of the contents of the box to Carlos Beralt, the executor? No, ma'am. Were the contents of the box removed? I don't recall. Do you know who Stephen Goldberg is? Yes, ma'am. Is he the lawyer for Carlos and Terry Beralt in their capacity as executors of the estates of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez? Yes, ma'am. And isn't it true, Mr. Anderson, that it was Steve Goldberg at the bank with Lyle Menendez and Carlos Beralt and not Erik Menendez at all? I don't recall that. If I were to tell you that Carlos Beralt has already testified, that it was Steve Goldberg and not Erik Menendez, would that refresh your recollection? No, ma'am, he says. Ay, ay, ay. He's being difficult and doesn't want to admit that he was wrong. I take it then also it wouldn't matter that Steve Goldberg has to say on this. Has a say on this? I don't understand that question. If Steve Goldberg were to say he was the person at the bank, not Erik Menendez, that wouldn't change your recollection either? I've answered that question. As I recall, Erik and Lyle were both there. All right. And as you recall here in this trial, Lyle Menendez made an identical statement before the safe was looked into and before the safety deposit box was looked into about not wanting any embarrassing information about his parents to be seen by others. Is that right? That's correct. Yet, when you spoke to Mrs. Bazanich back in November of 1993, you indicated that that statement was only made at the bank. Do you remember that? No, I don't remember that I said that. Do you remember that in talking about this for the first time when you spoke to Mrs. Bazanich during the last trial that you didn't indicate that there was any statement made by Lyle Menendez before looking at the safe in Randy Wright's garage? I didn't. The question missed me. Would you ask it again? All right. Let me ask you this. In fact, you didn't even mention to Mrs. Bazanich a safe in Randy Wright's garage when you spoke to her in November of 93, did you? I think that's correct. Now, let's go back to Kalamazoo, prior to the Kalamazoo tournament when Mrs. Menendez and Erik Menendez were at the house, okay? Okay. How long did your sister stay with you at the house during that trip? At your house? 3 or 4 days. Did you previously testify in the first trial that you believe she stayed for 2 weeks? That would have been an error, I don't believe, but you did say that. It would be an error in the questioning or an error in transcribing. She was not there 2 weeks. Well, let's see if it was an error in the questioning. 22613, start at 22612. Just to give clarity, I propose to read from line 14 through line 1 of 22613. At line 14, a question starts out with the word yes. Quote, yes, during the same time period, this August of 1989, do you know whether or not Kitty went to Oak Lawn, which is where you guys grew up, before she came to Downers Grove to your house that day? Answer. She visited Oak Lawn on that trip. Whether it was that day or before she came, it seems to me it was after. Question. So you think she visited Oak Lawn after she went to Kalamazoo? Answer. Oh, no. Question. Okay. Answer. After she was at my house. Question. All right. Now, how long did they stay at your house before they went to Kalamazoo? Answer. I believe 2 weeks. Now, back to his answer. He says, well, now to present day, I should say. He says, well, all I can suggest, Mrs. Abramson, is I would have interpreted at the time the difference between when she was at my house and the time of the homicides. There was never any understanding on my part or thought in my mind that she was there for 2 weeks. But that's what you answered. So, okay. So you misunderstood or you were interpreting it when you answered that as at the last trial. It had to be. So she didn't stay at your house for 2 weeks? No. She was there how many days? 3, 4 days, I would say. Was she there longer than Erik Menendez was there? Yes. So they definitely did not come together. No, ma'am. Yet you testified at the last trial that they did come together and that nobody met them at the airport because they rented a car. Do you remember that testimony? It was a very emotional time for me, Mrs. Bazanich. I would have to see the testimony or hear it. I don't think he was calling her Mrs. Bazanich. I think he was going to say something about Mrs. Bazanich and he stopped himself, is what that was. So interesting. I would love to know what he was going to say about Mrs. Bazanich. Good old Pam, the prosecutor from trial one. Certainly. When you didn't keep any logs or diaries of these activities at the time, did you, Mr. Menendez? Logs? At the time of these events, you weren't keeping a diary or a log of what happened or who came when or who picked them up at the airport or anything like that. Just my airplane log as to when I flew, my airplane log as to when I would fly. So your airplane log you would fill out when you would leave Downers Grove and go somewhere and leave somewhere and go back. You have to maintain that. Is that correct? That's correct. But as far as these other events were concerned, you never wrote anything down. You didn't know it would matter. Is that a fair statement? Yes, ma'am. And it is 6 years later? Yes, ma'am. So you don't have a perfect memory of these things, fair enough? I don't remember that weekend. Okay. But you don't have a perfect memory. No, I don't. Oh, he says, I do remember that weekend. I remember that weekend. She says, okay, but you don't have a perfect memory. No, I don't. Or at least you didn't 2 years ago of who who came. You don't have a memory of who came when and who came from where and who picked them up or any of those details. Is that correct? I do not have a perfect memory, if that's the question. All right, and you never wrote down any of the conversations that occurred either at your home or when you were in California that week after their deaths. No, ma'am. And when you came to California and spent those few days here, you saw Erik and Lyle periodically, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you didn't believe that they took their parents' lives at that time, did you? In 89? Correct. No, ma'am. Camcorder or no camera, correct? Correct. I have nothing further, Your Honor. Mr. Gessler. Mr. Gessler says, thank you, Your Honor. And now we're going to have cross by Lyle's team. Good morning, Mr. Andersen. Good morning, sir. After your conversation with Jose Menendez in Kalamazoo, you never talked to him again, did you? I did talk to him again. When was that? When I picked up to fly him to O'Hare Field. Picked him up to fly him to O'Hare Field. And after that, after you took him to O'Hare Field, that was the last time you saw Mr. Menendez, wasn't it? After we hugged each other and wished each other well and said goodbye. That was it. And that was the last time you talked to him? That's correct. Now, directing your attention to when you came here to California again and again to the garage at Mr. Wright's house. Yes, sir. You have been asked about that, right? Yes, sir. And when you arrived at the garage, did you get there at the same time as Lyle and Erik Menendez, or after them, or before them? As I recall, we followed them there. And did they get out of the car first? I don't recall that. Do you remember if you arrived at the same time as they did? We followed their car there. So they parked? Yes. And did you park behind them then? I don't recall. Did they precede you up to the house? I don't recall that, sir. Did you meet Mr. Wright? Yes, sir. And where was he when you met him? His house. Was he at the front door? Was he in the garage? Was he in the living room? He was standing at the front door, sir. Well, I don't want to assume. Do you remember if he was at the front door? I do not recall. No. You just said he was at the front door. Do you remember if Lyle Menendez introduced you to Mr. Wright? I had met Mr. Wright before. All right. And did he say you had met him at Kalamazoo? That's correct, as I remember. And did Mr. Wright then say, oh, yeah, I remember you from Kalamazoo, or something like that when you met him there? We had small talk. I don't recall what it was. Do you remember where the small talk took place? At his house. Do you remember where in the home? The front door, the garage, living room, bedroom? No. Did you go directly to the garage or did you go to the front door of the house first? I went to the front door of the house first, as I recall. And were Lyle and Erik at the front door of the house also? We were all together, I think, at that time. So it was you and Carlos Baralt and Lyle Menendez and Erik Menendez and Randy Wright all at the front door. That's as I recall. And then was the locksmith there at the time? I don't recall. Do you remember how long you had to wait for the locksmith? I do not. Or if you had to wait at all. It seems that I had to wait for the locksmith. What did you do while you waited? Talked. To Randy Wright? Generally, I suppose. Some conversation. I don't want to assume, but do you remember that? I remember discussing things, just talking. And was that at the front door, the garage, the backyard? I don't. Various places in the house. In the house. Yes. And all of you were still together. That's correct. And when did you go to the garage? How long after you arrived at the house? We walked through the house to the garage not long. Well, you had already had all of these conversations, hadn't you? Yes. Did you go to the garage before the locksmith arrived? I don't recall. Or did you go to the garage with the locksmith? Maybe, I don't recall. You have no clear recollection of going into the garage from the house then? I do. There was a side door, as I remember, there was a side door from the hallway into the garage, as well as an entrance, obviously, out to the street. And do you remember if you all went through that front door, that is, you and Carlos Baralt and Lyle and Erik Menendez? I don't have good recall on that. Did Randy Wright go into the garage with you? Yes. And was the safe already in the garage when you went in there? Yes, sir. Do you remember where in the garage it was? On the floor near the center of the garage. And then how long were you at all in the garage before you left the garage? To leave the area, you mean? Or I'm not sure. To leave the safe. To leave the safe. I don't recall the time frame. It wasn't long. Were you told to leave the garage by the locksmith? No, it was an agreed thing to leave the garage while the locksmith opened the lock. So everybody left the garage. That's correct. And was that because the locksmith said for safety he wanted everybody out of the garage? I don't recall that. Were there one or two or more locksmiths working on the safe, or do you remember? There were at least two. And did they have a torch or a drill, or what did they use? Drill. And so you and Lyle Menendez, Erik Menendez, and Carlos Barral all left the garage then while the locksmith worked. That's correct. And Randy Wright left with you, did he? Randy Wright left the garage also. And did all of you then go out to the backyard, or where did you all go? Carlos and Lyle and Erik and I were in the backyard, and I don't remember if he was with us. Don't remember if he was with you or at some place else at that point. That's correct. And then at that point is when the locksmith came out and said, "It's open." That's correct. And the locksmith said, "There's nothing in it," right? The locksmith did not discuss the contents, I don't think. I don't know if he opened it and looked. He did not discuss the contents. And at that point, Lyle Menendez said he wanted to go with Erik to look first. That's correct. Now, at that time, Mr. Andersen, you didn't know that your sister Kitty had ever tried to commit suicide before, did you? I didn't mean to say that word. Take her own life. Mr. Khan says, objection calls for hearsay irrelevant. The court says sustained. Mr. Gessler says, at that time, Mr. Andersen, did you know that your sister Kitty had written a letter, one of those letters that you leave when you take your own life? Mr. Khan says, objection, irrelevant, no foundation. The court says sustained. I don't know how that's a no foundation when you're asking, did you know that she had the letter or written the letter? And I don't think it's irrelevant. But anyways, Gessler says, may we approach, Your Honor? He says, on this particular subject. Gessler says yes. He says, I don't think it's necessary. Mr. Gessler says, Lyle Menendez did not tell you what family secrets might be in the safe, did he? No, sir. He just said he wanted to check first to see if there was anything embarrassing before the family came in. That's correct. And then after that, you looked in the safe and saw some papers. Yes, sir. And you don't remember what they were. Not at this time, no. And did you look through them? I don't recall. And at that time, did Lyle Menendez say, well, there is a key and the instructions as to where the safety deposit box is? He may have. Again, with the I don't recall and he may have, and like, how did you know about the safety deposit box if you didn't hear it from them? I don't understand how he doesn't recall. And you don't recall now if he did or not. I don't have a fresh recollection, no. All right. When you don't remember something, you have no problem with saying, I don't remember, do you? I would say so, that's correct. You're honest. When you do remember something, you say, when you do remember, you say, or when you don't remember, let me back up. When you do remember something, you say it. When you don't remember, you say, I don't recall. That's correct. And you did come out in February of 94 and talk with Mr. Khan, Ms. Nahara, and Detective Zoller, didn't you? Yes, sir. And you talked over a period of about 2 days with them about various things. As I recall, that's correct. And included in those things, you talked about were this visit at the time to the funeral service and a trip over to the garage. Yes, sir. And you gave them your best accurate recollection at that time, didn't you? Yes, sir. When you didn't remember something then, you said, I don't recall. When you did remember, you told them the truth. Yes, sir. And that's in all matters that you covered with them at that time, isn't it? Yes, sir. Mr. Gessler says, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? Yes. I'd just ask you to read to yourself the underlined portion here of this statement. Can you read the entire, or can I read the entire paragraph so I can put it into context? Sure, sure. Okay. Showing you this, does this refresh your recollection that you told Mr. Khan, Ms. Nahara, and Detective Zoller that you responded to the right house to open the safe? That's correct. That you were looking for a second will? I don't know that that's correct. All right, but at any rate, you gave the most accurate information you could to Mr. Khan, Ms. Nahara, and Detective Zoller. I had not seen those notes until yesterday, and there are some errors in those notes. Well, did you tell them that? I just received them last night. Quote, the safe was drilled by a locksmith that they had taken up to the house. Does that refresh your recollection as to that? Well, I know he was taken. Once the safe was open, this is another quote, once the safe was open, he and Carlos were told by Lyle and Erik that there was nothing of any importance in the safe except for the keys to the bank's safety deposit box, plus instructions on the location of the box. So you did say that they said that. Did you tell Detective Zoller that? Apparently. May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Sure. No further questions. Any redirect? Yes, Your Honor. So now we've got Mr. Khan doing a little bit of redirect with the witness. All right. He asks, Mr. Andersen, you were asked by defense counsel whether during the conversation that you overheard between your sister and Erik Menendez there was a reference to Lyle Menendez having purchased a camcorder on the Visa. Do you remember that? Yes, sir. And you also said, Ms. Amerson says, that misstates the question, Your Honor. Overruled. You also said that at some point your sister said to her son, Erik, you kids have got to stop doing these things. Can you tell us when your sister made that response? That is, the you kids have got to stop doing these things in relation to the statement that you heard that Lyle Menendez had purchased the camcorder on the Visa card. It was after I had asked Erik what had happened, and that's when he told me about the purchase by Lyle. Okay. I am just asking you right now about the conversation that you heard between your sister and Erik Menendez. Did you hear Erik Menendez make reference to Lyle purchasing the camcorder on the Visa card? Yes, sir. And was that a comment that he made to your sister? He divulged it to me. And was your sister present when he divulged that to you? I don't know that she was. Did you hear Erik Menendez make reference or say to your sister that Lyle had purchased the camera on the Visa card? They had a conversation. Move to strike that as non-responsive, says Mr. Gessler. The court says sustained. The answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, okay, you indicated that although you previously made the statement during an interview back in February of 99 that at the time that you went to the garage of Randy Wright, you were looking for a second will. What is your best recollection today in terms of whether at the time you went to the garage of Randy Wright, whether the original will had already been found or not? As I recall, the original will had not been found. Now, you referred to your sister, or at least we refer to your sister here in court as Kitty Menendez. What was her proper name? Mary Louise Menendez was her proper name. And you also said that when Lyle Menendez asked you not to be present during the time that he opened up the safe, he made reference to a concern that something embarrassing might be in the safe. Was that right? That's correct. Did you ask him at that time why he had brought the safe to the house of a probate attorney? Ms. Andersen says, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. Assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained. I have no further questions. Anything else? Thank you, Your Honor. So Ms. Abramson's going to get up and do a couple of questions here. All right, Ms. Abramson says, Mr. Andersen, how many times have you talked to Detective Leslie Zoller from the Beverly Hills Police Department? I don't recall. Do you think he's honest? Yes, ma'am. I'm surprised that wasn't objected to because that's speculation or, a conclusion on their part. I don't, it's not evidence. But anyways, do you think he's honest? Yes, ma'am. Now you're claiming that you saw this police report last night for the first time. Is that what you're saying? Which report are you referring to? The one that has your statement from February 22nd and February 23rd of 1994 in it. That's correct. And you're saying that in fact in this is an 8-page statement, correct? I don't know the number of pages. Well, you got it last night. I'm sorry, ma'am. I did not count the pages. Do you have a copy? Yes, ma'am. They gave you your own copy? Yes, ma'am. You had as much time as you needed to read it? Well, this morning. Okay. And are you saying that this morning was the first time that you read the section of that 8-page statement where you were talking about the safe and the will and the bank, these two paragraphs that I am lining up for you here, either last night or this morning? Mr. Anderson, I showed you those two paragraphs when you were on the witness stand in a hearing yesterday morning out of the presence of the jury, didn't I? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And when you read it at that time, the phrase, Brian Andersen said that when he arrived in Los Angeles on the Wednesday after the homicides, he assisted Carlos Peralt in trying to find the most recent will of Kitty and Jose. You recall I read that to you during that hearing? Yes, ma'am. And you didn't say once, that's a mistake, did you? I had not seen that report, ma'am. I showed it to you. That's the first time I had ever seen it. Yesterday morning? Yes. And then I also pointed out just those 2 pages. I would point out I did not see the entire report. But these are the only 2 pages that talk about this topic. Isn't that true? Objection irrelevant. Overruled. These 2 paragraphs I showed you, these 2 paragraphs are the only part that talk about the will and the safe and the bank. That's correct. And do you see that there is an underlined sentence to here, the sentence reading, they were looking for a second will? Do you see that starting with the last 2 words on page 6 and then the first 5 words on page 7? Yes. And I underlined those words before I showed you that report yesterday morning before the jury was here. Isn't that true? I don't know when you underlined it. Well, I showed it to you underlined. Yes, ma'am. And at that time, you weren't criticizing Detective Zoller's report writing here, were you? Or there, were you? I had not seen the error in the report at the time. Well, I showed you that, and that's what you're claiming is now an error. Well, let me show you Detective Zoller's notes. He took notes while you were being interviewed, didn't he? Yes, ma'am. I'm holding your honor. I don't even know how many pages this is. Let me count. The first date is 0900 hours at 2/22/94, 18 pages of what appear to be handwritten notes. Mr. Khan says, objection calls for hearsay, no question pending, motion to strike. What? Nobody answered a question. Okay. The court says, well, at this point, she is just showing the notes to him, so objection overruled. Uh, Ms. Abramson says, and I have marked one of the pages, the 15th page, page 15. Do you see the highlighted sentence in those notes? Yes, ma'am. Would you read them out loud? Objection calls for hearsay, sustained. Those notes contain the same sentence the same sentence as the one that's underlined in the report, doesn't it? Objection calls for hearsay, and the court sustains that the notes have never been identified anyway. So Ms. Abramson says, okay, we'll do that. We were trying to tell Detective Zoller the truth on February 22nd and 23rd of 1994. Yes, ma'am. And we're Mr. Khan and hold on, my dog needs a blanket. Um, and And were Mr. Khan and Ms. Nahara also present? Yes, ma'am. And have they, Mr. Khan or Ms. Nahara, ever called you and said, gee, Detective Zoller got it wrong in his report? We know that you didn't say they were looking for a second will. Objection, irrelevant. Saberson says, did you ever hear them on that? Objection, irrelevant. Calls for hearsay. Overruled. All right, sorry, I'm gonna get the dog situated here. All right, so the court overrules that. The witness says, that was which conversation? Would you repeat? Mr. Abramson says, I'm sorry, have you since February 22nd and 23rd, 1994, ever received any contact from Mr. Khan or Ms. Nahara where they said, gee, Detective Zoller got it wrong in his report about your saying that they were looking for a second will? I did not see the report and do not remember that conversation. This witness is difficult just for being difficult. And they never called you to tell you there was a mistake in this report, did they? No, ma'am. Nothing further. Mr. Gessler, anything further? He has just one question. All right, so Mr. Gessler says, Mr. Andersen, you testified yesterday that the statement by Lyle Menendez was, quote, there might be something embarrassing to my parents in the safe. Isn't that what you said? That's correct. Nothing further. Any redirect? Oh, brother, this is going to be one of those. Mr. Khan has some redirect. Yesterday, when you were on the witness stand outside the presence of the jury, counsel showed you a couple of paragraphs. Is that correct? That's correct. Did she give you the 8-page report and give you an opportunity to read the whole report at that time? She did not. And you did not read that report in court. That's correct. Did you read it last night for the first time? Last night and this morning. Thank you, sir. Nothing further. Anything else? Asks the court. Miss Abramson says, yes. So we've got some more recross. Here, Mr. Andersen, is the 8-page report. Show me any other place in that report where it talks about the will, the bank, and the safety deposit box. Mr. Khan says, objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope. The court says, I think he has already indicated that that was the only place. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. The court says, okay, thank you, sir. You may step down. Did he ask Mr. Gessler? No, he didn't ask Gessler anything. The court says, do you want the witness to remain on call? Mr. Gessler says, yes, Your Honor. The court says, or is he excused? Okay, he is subject to being recalled, but he is excused for today. Thank you, sir. And your next witness, is that witness here? Ms. Nahara says, yes, Your Honor. Our next witness would be Ms. Eisenberg. So now we're going to switch to the next witness, Marzie Eisenberg, who is formerly Jose Menendez's assistant at Live Entertainment. Oh, her name's Marlene. I didn't know that. All right, so the clerk swears her in. She spells her name and all that jazz. Direct examination begins. Ms. Nahara says, Ms. Eisenberg, on August 20th of 1989, did you work at Live Entertainment? Yes, I did. And what was your job? What was your job title at Live Entertainment? I was the assistant to the chairman of the board. And who was the chairman of the board? Jose Menendez. Now, sometime after August 20th, 1989, did you hear about the homicides of Jose Menendez and Kitty Menendez? Yes, I did. And when did you hear about it? Approximately 8:15 that Monday morning when I arrived at the office. Excuse me, Your Honor, there needs to be an admonition to the jury. The court says yes. As to the witness and her testimony, it's being offered and is to be considered by the jury only as to the defendant, Lyle Menendez. All right, you may continue. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor. Now, when you heard this information that Jose Menendez and Kitty Menendez were no longer alive, did you call the house? I did. I guess to see if it was true. I called. I spoke to Detective Zoller and left him a message and asked him to have either Lyle or Erik call me. They were not at the house. I think they were with a tennis coach. So that would be Mark Heffernan at the time. So Mr. Gessler says, Your Honor, I would object. It's beyond the question asked. It's non-responsive. The court says, sustained. The answer is stricken. Why don't you re-ask the question? Ms. Nahara says, okay. After you heard that Jose Menendez and Kitty Menendez were no longer alive, did you call the Menendez house? Yes, I did. And did you speak to somebody there? Yes, I did. And who did you speak to? Detective Zoller. And did you make any request of Detective Zoller? I did. And what was that? That one of the sons call me. And after you made that request, did you hear at any time from either of the defendants? Yes, I did. And how did that come about? Lyle returned my call sometime during that afternoon or late morning. I think it was the afternoon. And this would be on Monday, August 21st. Yes. And when Lyle Menendez returned your phone call, did you have a conversation with him? Yes, I did. And what did he say during this conversation? I asked him or made the statement what happened, and his remark was, I don't know. I was in the shower. I didn't hear anything. Now, after he told you that he had been in the shower and didn't hear anything, did he tell you anything else about the conversation? Nothing that I recall, no. Nothing in particular? Did you have another conversation with the defendant Lyle Menendez? Yes, I did. And when did this come about? Well, it would have been the next day, because his question to me was he called me at the office. The court says you can answer the question you can answer the question the next day. The witness says he asked what would happen if they didn't find the will. I don't know why the court says you can answer the question the next day. What? I don't know. Okay. The witness says, he asked me what would happen if they didn't find the well. Ms. Nahara says, and he asked you this, do you recall what time of the day it was that he called you and asked you about what would happen if they didn't find the will? The time? No, no. But this would have been a Tuesday. It would have been. It would have been Tuesday because I felt that he wouldn't have asked me that question once the family arrived. And they started to arrive in California, I believe late Tuesday, early Wednesday. And when he asked you what would happen if they couldn't find a will, what did you tell them? Well, what I said to him was, it will probably get tied up in the courts, and I'm not very experienced. Mr. Gessler says, Your Honor, I would object. It's non-responsive. The court says, Is this what you said? Yeah, just about, just about. Overruled. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that answer? That it would be tied up in the courts and it would take a while, to settle the will. I don't have much experience with wills, so I didn't give him a great deal of information. And after you told him that it would probably take a while to settle the will if there wasn't one found, did you later learn that a will was found? As far as the will, I don't recall what happened. I didn't have a lot of contact regarding the will, so I don't really recall. Now, at some point, did you go to the memorial service that was held here in California for Jose and Kitty Menendez? Yes. And was this on Friday, August 25th? Yes. Now, at that memorial service, after the service, did you leave in a limousine? Yes. Were you with anybody in that limousine? Yes. And who were you with? Lyle, Erik, and cousin Carlos. Carlos Menendez, not Baralt. And while you were in that limousine with Lyle Menendez, did you have a conversation with him? With Lyle. And with regards to that conversation, what did he tell you? Lyle was to my left. His right leg was across his left leg, and he was moving his foot kind of back and forth. And he said to me, "Hey, Marcy, who said I couldn't fill my father's shoes?" And my response was, "Don't fill his shoes. Make your own tracks in life." And he said, "You don't understand. These are my father's shoes." And what was he doing when he said that? Well, his foot was just kind of flexing back and forth, you know? And was that the only conversation that you had with him in the limousine? Yeah, that I had with him. Your Honor, that's all I have. Cross-examination. Thank you, Your Honor, says Mr. Gessler. This was stupid. Why even call this witness? But okay, that's where we're at. I just don't think that testimony really proved anything. And to say that he asked her a question about filling his father's shoes and to imply that that means that he's guilty in some way is just ridiculous to me. But let's move on, shall we? All right, so Mr. Gessler says, "Good morning, Ms. Eisenberg." Good morning. "You were secretary and assistant to Jose Menendez for a number of years, weren't you?" Yes. "Both in New York City?" Yes. "And at two different positions he held there?" Yes. "And then you came out to California?" Yes. "Not with him, but later on?" Yes. "And you were gone for a while and then came back and assisted him again?" Yes. "And you considered yourself a loyal secretary, didn't you?" Ms. Nahara says, "I'm going to object as irrelevant." The court overrules that. Mr. Gessler says, "You were loyal to your boss?" Yes. "And as a matter of fact, you helped hide an affair that he had from his wife, didn't you?" Objection. Irrelevant. Sustained. But the jury heard it, and that's what matters. "When you were here, did you protect his desk in a way?" Protect his desk? Yes, make sure that there was nothing on it that somebody else shouldn't see. Personal things that Ms. Nahara says, "I'm going to object as irrelevant." Sustained. "When you were here in California, did you have a code system for callers that called?" No, I objection irrelevant. Sustained. "Did you have anything set up to use callers by their initials so that nobody would know who the caller was?" No, we had nothing. Objection irrelevant and outside the scope. Sustained. The answer is stricken. Well, this is not helpful. Mr. Gessler continues. "While you were here, did Mr. Menendez refer you to what did Mr. Menendez refer you to you as his office wife?" Sorry, let me repeat that. I'm struggling as yeah, I always start to struggle after a certain point. My brain gets tired. All right, so while you were here, did Mr. Menendez refer to you as his office wife? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. You can answer that question. The witness says, Kitty and I referred to me as his office wife. He did not. Really? I have a problem. I don't think I have a problem believing that. I don't think Kitty would allow that. Or not that it would be well received by her in the house if that happened. Mr. Gessler says, "And did he ever refer to you as the other Mrs. Menendez?" Kitty and I did. All right, and that's because of your closeness to Mr. Menendez, isn't it? Not to just Mr. Menendez, Mrs. Menendez also. Huh? Why would you be Mrs. Menendez if you're having a close relationship with Mrs. Menendez? That makes no sense. But okay. Now, this first call that you made, that was a call that you made over to the house? Yes. And you think that was the morning of August 21st? I know. That's when you had contacted Detective Zoller to have either Erik or Lyle call you? Yes. Do you remember what time one of them returned the call? I believe it was in the afternoon, and that would be Monday afternoon. Yes. Do you remember if it was early afternoon, late afternoon? No, I don't remember the time. Where were you when you received the call back? I was in the office. And did you work a full day that day? I worked well into the night that day. So it could have been any time that afternoon. It was the afternoon, not the evening. Okay, but afternoon meaning any time, say, between noon and 5? More like noon and 2. I don't believe it was late into the day. Now, the topic of that call was what? I wanted to make sure that they were okay. I hadn't spoken to them, and then we had the brief shower conversation. What? That's when the shower conversation took place? I believe so. How did it come up? Well, my comment to Lyle, I basically just made the statement, what happened, as if to say, what the hell happened here, and and that was his remark, his response to me. His remark was, I was in the shower, I didn't hear anything, something like that. Right, exactly. I don't know what happened. I was in the shower, I didn't hear anything. And then there was another call that you had with Lyle Menendez talking about the will. The following day was a brief conversation. Just, this is Tuesday now? Yes. Okay. And how do you recollect that this was Tuesday as opposed to some other day? Because the family started to arrive in California, and I felt that there would be no reason for him to ask me that question if he had Carlos Peralt there. Why would he come to me with that? So that's how you remember dating it as Tuesday. Exactly. Okay. Carlos Peralt arrived on Monday, didn't he? I don't know. No, no one arrived on Monday, if I recall. And if it was Monday, it would have been very, very late Monday. But I don't recall him arriving Monday. Were you making arrangements for the family? I was making a lot of the arrangements. Did that include the family as to where they were staying? Actually, Carolco made a lot of those arrangements. I just let them know where they were staying. And Carolco is a company? Yes. I believe the Carolco company owns Live Entertainment or something like that. I don't know. And I take it you felt this request of you about a will was a rather odd statement for somebody to make. I didn't think of it as being odd. I just, I responded the best I could with was that my response about it being tied up, that it would delay probate or delay the estate or something. Exactly. But you didn't attach any significance to that to it then? Not at all. And you talked to Detective Zoller many times during that period of time, didn't you? That's in August, September, October 1989. I am sure I did. And you never mentioned this will conversation to him, did you? I don't recall whether I did or not. And you never mentioned the shower conversation to Detective Zoller either, did you? The shower conversation for me was what I have referred to as a throwaway conversation. It was there. Following that, I read that Lyle and Erik were stating they were at the movies. I had first thought that I had misunderstood what Lyle had said to me. I thought, gee, I thought he said he was in the shower, and now he's saying he's at the movies. I just kind of pushed it aside, and for lack of a better word, I buried it and didn't give it a thought. Didn't give it a lot of thought. Then the first time that you told Detective Zoller about the comment was in December of 1989, wasn't it? That is the shower comment. I don't recall the date. Do you remember having a conversation with Detective Zoller approximately December 11th, 1989? I remember having a conversation with him. I don't remember the date of the conversation. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Yes. My reading glasses you have. I can't see a thing. I don't have them, she says. Ms. Nahara says, Mr. Gessler, is this the December 14th, 1989 one-page report? Mr. Gessler says, yes. Ms. Nahara says, thank you. The witness says, I don't recall when I had the conversation. Can I get my reading glasses? Mr. Gessler says, sure. The witness says, it's blurred. It's not funny. It's not going to help. I don't recall the date, but okay. Mr. Gessler says, okay. Does looking at this police report, does that refresh your recollection as to December 11th, 1989 being the approximate time that you had this conversation with Detective Zoller? I'll go along with the date. I don't recall, so I can't argue if that's what. Ms. Nahara says, I object. Make a motion to strike, Your Honor. The witness says, I just don't recall. The court says, overruled. The answer will stand. Mr. Gessler says, all right. And at that time, did you ask Detective Zoller if he recalled your having said that Lyle was in the guest house at the time of the homicides taking a shower, and he said, no, I don't recall that? All right. I didn't know there was. I knew of a guest house. I had no knowledge of where Lyle was living or taking showers or anything else. So this I found out later. No, I don't recall saying that. All right. You didn't make any mention of the will at that time to Detective Zoller, did you? Of the statement of Lyle saying, what if they can't find the will? I wouldn't remember. I would imagine at that point the will would have been found. I really didn't think much of it. So the answer is you didn't tell Detective Zoller that. I don't remember. I can't answer that. And you didn't tell Detective Zoller about the incident are of these are my father's shoes at any time, did you? I don't recall. Did you think the incident about him saying, these are my father's shoes, was of any importance? I object as irrelevant. The court says, at what point? Mr. Gessler says, at the time when he made that statement to you. It made me I object as irrelevant what she thought, overruled. I was extremely uncomfortable with it. It was a very bizarre conversation. Okay. In any of your conversations then with Detective Zoller during the fall of 1989, did you report that incident to him? I would have to think that I did. Whether I did, I just don't remember. So you don't remember any context in which you might have said that to Detective Zoller? I really don't remember. Or any conversation in which you might have come up of which that might have come up between you and Detective Zoller? No, I did mention it to a friend of mine, but I don't remember whether I mentioned it to him or not. And Detective Zoller, you did know, was the investigating officer for this matter, as you mentioned that Lyle Menendez and his legs had his legs crossed and his right leg was swung over his left leg. All right. And then you said flexed in some way? He was flexing the shoe back and forth. And I think you described that as a loafer with a tassel. Yes. And do you remember where the tassel was on the loafer? Oh, sorry. Do you remember where the tassel was on the loafer? And do you remember the color of the loafers? It was a dark color. I don't remember whether it was a black color, a dark ox blood color, but and the tassel was clearly visible. Oh, absolutely. And did you recognize these as shoes that Jose Menendez had worn? They looked familiar, but I didn't attach them to being Jose's shoes. I mean, I don't sit and watch people's, shoes, and it's very common loafer that many, many men wear. So I wouldn't have thought anything of it as far as being his father's shoes until he said what he said. But until then, it was just a loafer with a tassel when you saw it there as he flexed his ankle. Right. And this was when now? This was in the limousine? Yes. Coming back from the memorial service here? Yes. And this was in Los Angeles? Yes. And that's the one that was held Friday, August 29th or 25th at the Directors Guild. Mr. Gessler says, "May I have just a moment, Your Honor?" The court says, "Yes." "Nothing further, Your Honor. Any redirect?" "No redirect, Your Honor." Okay, thank you. Okay, so we did get through all of that. Um, oh, there's argument. But you know what? I gotta stop soon because I gotta go. I gotta be somewhere. So, um, maybe I'll stop here and then eh, I'll read a little bit more. So indecisive. All right. So the court says, you know what? I will stop here and then we'll get to the argument in the next one because I don't want to interrupt it. I don't like interrupting in the middle of stuff either. So that's another reason why it's hard to do these long videos and short. It's hard to do these videos, period. Because you kind of like figure out how long it's going to be and estimate your timing and whatnot. Anyways, so the court says any redirect, there's none. The witness can be excused, subject to recall. All right, we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at approximately a quarter of the hour. The jury exits the courtroom, and the following proceedings are held. And that's where I'm going to stop because I don't want to get into an argument and then have us, you know, get to a good spot and then we got to stop. So we will continue here in the next episode. I'm trying to make these shorter but more consistent throughout the week so we have something to watch daily or, every couple days. So that's my new goal. I've been so inconsistent with these. I'm sorry. They're hard to do and it takes a lot out of me. Like it takes a lot of energy to just read sometimes with my autoimmune disease. So, um, getting around to reading, a lengthy testimony can be a struggle for me. So maybe this isn't the best. Doing a true crime channel maybe isn't the best thing for me, but whatever. And that's what I'm doing right now. So we will I'm committed until we finish the testimony of this trial. So I'm going to keep us going. And that's why I want to do more frequent videos so we can get through this quickly or at least a little faster because it's going to take forever. Because it is still like a 6-month trial to begin with. And then I'm not doing one day per day, so it's going to take us a while to get through. So I'm going to try to speed it along for us. So, all right, I'm going to leave you guys here. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. And thank you so much. Shout out to the folks over there on Rumble. Thank you to everyone on YouTube doing all those YouTubey things. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Bye now.